Yo, welcome to That Is Dope. That track you just heard is from our current featured artist, Russell Allen, aka Real the Poet, titled Hope, featuring David Napier. You can hear more from Russell at soundcloud.com/Real the Poet. Do we have a hell of a show for you, whether you're driving, changing diapers, or whatever it is you beautiful people do. Stay tuned in for episode 3 of Dad Is Dope.
But I seen a lot. Watched out for bad boys coming clean up the block. Rep 148, now they coming back home. Respect to all y'all motherfuckers, my brother just stay strong. See my cousin back it up by the pound. Hit it still like it's time to cool down. News travel quick in this small town. Get it off cause I need to have you round. Yeah, I dabbled in it. Dog passed like I started Guinness. Daddy did fair time when they caught him pitching. It was in my bloodstream. I just caught the itch and zip lock straight.
Welcome to episode 3 of Dad Is Dope. Today's guest is none other than Lexington's own Dan Wu, father and former MasterChef contestant. We're here to talk about how he's bringing the ramen that wowed Chef Gordon Ramsay to Lexington. What's up, Dan?
Hey, how's it going?
How you doing, man?
Excellent.
It's nice to meet you, man. I've read a lot about you. We've tried to make some of your pop-ups, and it's like we're always like a day behind, so they always sell out right before we're able to get tickets. Man.
Yeah. I mean, that's the fun and the risk of doing pop-ups. You make a certain amount of food, and you never know if you're going to be busy or sell out a couple hours early. You know? Right.
That's a good thing, though.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Connie and we've definitely been devastated a few times, but I think she just got to try your cold ramen. Where was it at, Connie? Not the night market, but
Warehouse Block Party, maybe?
Yeah. Yep, that was it. Yeah, and she was telling me about cold ramen. I'm like, okay, that sounds good.
Yeah, I started slinging cold ramen last summer when I was doing pop-ups because I wanted to do ramen, but in 90-degree weather, nobody wants a hot bowl of soup.
Right.
So there's a dish in Japanese cuisine called hiyashi chuka.
Okay.
Which is basically you can take ramen, you can take soba, different kinds of noodles. You cook it, you shock it, and then you dress it in a really light, citrusy kind of dressing.
Yeah.
And then you put a bunch of toppings on it, and it's so friggin' great.
Yeah.
And I was determined last year to take it from a dish that nobody had ever heard of to something that you're gonna crave.
Cool.
And so I've been slinging that all summer.
Awesome.
This summer, and it's such a great summer dish.
Yeah, it sounds good. It sounds refreshing, and that's the one thing. Like ramen is definitely like a soul food, and as far as in my opinion, like it just reminds me of some of those hearty dishes that my family made me when I was younger. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like to have something like that to where it's much more refreshing in a summertime setting, it's definitely cool, man.
Yeah.
It shows versatility as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And at the restaurant at Atomic Ramen, the cold ramen is going to be my vegetarian option.
Cool.
So it'll be default vegetarian. You can change up 2 things to make it vegan, or you can add meat toppings onto it if you want.
See, look, we're hopping right into food. So before we dive right in, man, I'm going to give you an opportunity. I kind of gave you a quick introduction on you. If you just kind of want to introduce yourself and what you're about, man.
Sure. The short, long story. I was born in China. I came to the States when I was a kid. I've lived in the U.S. for most of my life now.
Okay.
We moved to Fargo, North Dakota. Lived there for a few years.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we ended up in Lexington, Kentucky. I went to junior high school in UK.
Okay.
Moved out to San Francisco, moved out to Brooklyn, and then came back. I've been back now for about 11 years.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so it's a kind of a long whirlwind, lived all kinds of places, gathered all kinds of experiences, and I'm honestly super happy to be back in Lexington, given how the food and drink scene has really grown in the last few years. It's pretty
That's
awesome
something I've talked to about with the last couple guests about, is just how Lexington is rapidly evolving, and this city is becoming kind of a fertile ground, you know what I mean? For anybody that's kind of wanting to start a startup or do something new, it's definitely a good place to do it. At least I think so.
Yeah, at least in the food scene, it doesn't feel competitive. It feels really collaborative and really supportive.
Yeah.
I have so many friends who are doing restaurants and food trucks and breweries and stuff like that. And anytime you do anything, they'll come out and support you and help you and give you advice.
And that goes a long way, man.
Absolutely.
Definitely. So when did you actually start cooking?
I've been cooking, I would say, since I was a kid, just growing up as kind of a latchkey kid.
Okay.
Kind of fending for myself a lot. I cooked all through college, nothing really serious. And then I spent 9 years in San Francisco and New York two of the best eating cities in America.
Yeah.
And I hardly cooked at all because you could just go out every night of the week, you know.
Right.
I came back to Lexington, and it was a little bit of a reverse culture shock coming from New York. I think I plowed through Lexington restaurants in like a month or two. And I was like, okay, now what? And I had this sort of idea of like, well, I can cook a lot of this stuff, or I can cook a lot of the stuff that I don't see here, or I can make it better.
Yeah.
And I started getting more serious about it. And honestly, just completely self-taught, reading cookbooks, looking at YouTube videos, you know, doing a little research, experimenting, going to restaurants, and then coming home and trying to reverse engineer dishes.
Okay.
And it wasn't until about 3.5 years ago, wasn't until the whole Master Chef thing came about, until I got serious about it, and Master Chef allowed me to take that leap from amateur to professional.
Okay. So you said that MasterChef came about. Let me ask you, how did it come about? Did you just see it on TV and think, this could be a good idea? Or?
You know, I was actually more of a Top Chef fan. I don't think I ever watched MasterChef until about almost 4 years ago now. A friend of mine sent me a text, and he said, I can't remember the date. He said, Columbus, Ohio, October 11th.
Right.
I said, what are you talking about? He said, MasterChef tryouts. And I said, huh. Okay.
That could be fun.
Yeah, so I looked into it. I applied for it. We drove up to Columbus. I brought a dish. Went through that whole day sort of audition and tasting and stuff. They called me back for the next day. Went back up the next day, did some video stuff, and then just kind of went on from there. I didn't find out until about late December that I'd gotten on, but they kept sending me paperwork and signature stuff and psychological evaluations and all this stuff. So it went pretty deep, and I was like getting hopeful, obviously.
Right.
And then they finally sent me the email and said, okay, we got you booked on a flight for January, whatever. And
That's
I was
awesome.
Like, oh shit! Like, okay.
Where did you actually fly out to? Where were the
it's in
the first episode?
Yeah, in Los Angeles, in Burbank.
Okay.
Like on a studio.
Right.
Yeah.
So on that season, I can't remember. Did they start out with like a top 20 there?
So previous seasons. So all I had to go on. So once I started in the application process, I started watching the last season of MasterChef to get a sense. And that season, they basically had 100 people fly out and then do these quick little tryouts.
Dwindled them down.
Yeah, in front of the judges. And there were a lot of people you could tell they brought on just to kind of make fun of.
Right.
Almost in like an old school Idol kind of sense. So that's what I was kind of prepared for. So we show up, and there's 100 of us. So I'm kind of ready to do this thing. And then 2 days in to LA, they cut us down to 30 without being on air, without filming anything.
Oh, wow.
Like we had done this other sort of on-camera thing in a test kitchen, and then one day, it was a crazy nervous day. We were all gathered in a conference room, and one of the producers comes out with a sheet of paper, and she says, if I call your name, you're going on to the next part, of the process.
Nerve-wracking.
And we had no idea how many they were going to pick. And she started with men's names, and I think I was like number 8. And then at about 15 names, she stopped and she said, okay, now the women's side. So you saw 35 guys deflate.
Oh, yeah.
Like right there.
And hear
like,
it
like
probably
they're
too.
done. They're
Yeah.
done. I mean, there was crying,
Right.
all kinds of stuff. And then they called 15 women. So then the 30 of us tried out for aprons, and 22 of us got aprons. So
Okay.
we cut another 8. But from there, we were on the air. We were filming.
Right.
And it didn't feel real to me until I walked onto the set.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been on sort of a Hollywood movie or TV set, these sound stages, they're just big, huge, empty warehouses. So when you walk in, it's all, equipment and gear and wood and stuff like that. It doesn't look like anything. And then we get to this big door that says Master Chef, and it still doesn't look like anything. And then they pull it open, and we walk into the set. And I was like, oh, this is what I've seen on TV. I'm in the room. I'm in the kitchen of Master Chef. And then pretty soon, 20 feet away from me was Gordon Ramsay, Joe Bastianich, and Graham Elliott. And I was like, okay, this is real
That's
now.
definitely got to be, man, it just got to be kind of buzz behind that.
Yeah.
Just a natural high. I mean, I've always assumed that it's just kind of a roller coaster ride, because when they're putting that many people that are wanting something into the same room, and then watching them kind of compete head to head and whatnot, it's got to be just hectic. How long were like the time between each episode. So you see like where you guys were going in and you had the eliminations and you have the challenges. Like in real time, it's like a week, but or not in real time, but we're at home. It's a week.
Right.
But how long is it actually in real time?
Pretty much every day. We shot every weekday, sometimes on Saturdays as well. So every day was an episode, and just about every day or every other day somebody got cut.
Yeah.
And there were some episodes that were a little bit longer, so we would come back the next day with the same shirt on and pretend that it was the same day. So we were always taught not to say good morning or good afternoon or anything like that. Just
because you have no idea when the film's getting used, actually.
Yeah, exactly. And then there were some days where it was shorter, where we would go change midway through and then shoot the next day's episode, but on that same day. So it was very condensed. But it... the experience of it, because they shot it and they would edit it before it goes to air, so it wasn't like live. It wasn't like, these idol shows where you vote. And,
right.
So we were not allowed to... I liken it as like part Truman Show, part summer camp, part prison.
Okay.
Because we got like one phone call a week back to family. They took away our cell phones. They took away all our electronic devices. We had no internet.
Try to keep any leaking of it.
Yeah, exactly. They don't want you to spoil it. And it makes sense. Like when I got home and people were like, "Did you win? How far did you get?" And I was like, "Watch the show."
Right.
And I genuinely didn't want to tell people.
Yeah.
Just because it's like, why would I spoil it for them? Like, you want to see, right?
Yeah.
But it's crazy because you get into this other mindset, so you have no contact with the outside. All the things that were important to you back home, like family, like friends, like your work, like your social life, is not there. It's gone. And you have this whole other set of priorities now. Like, now my priority is like, get through this challenge. Don't get eliminated. Don't fuck this up.
Everything changes.
You know what I mean? Everything completely changes. So it's this crazy sort of mindset. When I got home after I got eliminated, I had about a week of just, I didn't want to do anything except like go on Facebook and talk to my other friends who had gotten eliminated.
Right.
And rehash our experiences. Like, I didn't want to connect with my real world for a little while.
Because you were still plugged in a little
bit.
It
was plugged in, and I was, also Monday morning quarterbacking this stuff. Like, man, if I had done this differently, or if I had stepped up on this challenge, then I wouldn't even gotten to elimination. And what if this had happened?
Yeah.
And it took me a little while to kind of get past that and be like, okay, chill. That was like this little surreal, weird vacation you had.
And especially with it happening so quickly, like you talking about how it's like every day, because they don't give that vibe when you're watching it. It almost seems like, you have breaks between, but I knew it had to be with the filming schedule. It has to be hectic.
Yeah, they filmed, I think, a total of 8 or 9 weeks, and I was there for 5 weeks.
Wow.
And the other part of it that's interesting is the little confessionals that you see. So when you see somebody talking, they're like, "Yeah, when I saw that, shrimp was the secret ingredient, I got really excited." So they tell us to talk in present tense because they're filming this after the challenge. Yeah. But the way they cut it is as if we were talking about it in present tense.
Right.
And that's kind of tough too because when you're eliminated, you're the first one that gets interviewed because they want to get that immediate emotion from you. And sometimes it's hard because they'll say, okay, now talk me through the beginning of the challenge. And you're sitting here, your heart's thumping, you're sad, you're angry.
You just got eliminated.
You're frustrated. And you want to talk about this thing. And they kind of slow you down and kind of guide you through the narrative again. Like, okay, what did you think when you walked into this kitchen and this thing happened and you had to... So it was...
You said there was 22 contestants?
Yeah, 22 who got aprons.
So you made it through 8 eliminations then, right? Because you were 14th, correct? Is that when you got voted off? Mm-hmm. And was it pasta that took you out? Am I right on that?
No, it was red velvet cake.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Ooh,
yeah, and
dessert.
I'm not a baker.
Yeah.
And it is one of those things that I've been for most of my cooking life a very sort of spontaneous, seat of the pants, play with it, tweak it, know exact amounts, dash of this kind of thing. And you can't do that with baking.
At all. It's a science.
Yeah. And part of it, like, I made like stupid mistakes. Like, red velvet cake's a layer cake, right? So I had 3 cakes made and I had to level them off. I didn't have an experience doing that, so mine weren't that level. So they still had a little curvature on the outside. So when I stacked them and then I had to ice it,
right,
I didn't have enough icing because I had all these like crevices to put through, and then the cake wasn't a great consistency. It's just like,
yeah, just a combination.
The whole thing. Things. I could tell like midway through that challenge, I was like, shit, this is not
we're in trouble.
gonna go well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But ultimately, my elimination came down to me and this guy from Texas named Cutter.
I remember
standing
Cutter.
side by side. And I remember, and this is the interesting thing as you live and learn, especially about reality television. You know, I went on the show thinking that it was a cooking show or a cooking competition. It's a TV show with a cooking element.
Right.
What they're looking for is personalities, conflicts, struggles, story arcs.
Yeah.
And if you don't give them that, you're not as valuable to them. So I'm standing there with this guy, and he's being super defensive and kind of disrespectful to the judges. You know, as we're facing elimination, I'm being humble. It's like, yeah, I know I screwed up. I could have done this better. You know, if you give me a chance, I'll do better next time.
Yeah.
And then boom, I get cut. And I was pissed.
Yeah.
And I'm like, how does this make any sense?
Right.
And then getting some distance from it and then watching the show, it's like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Why would they keep me when they have this guy who can give them several more episodes of, you know, being a dick or potential redemption?
Yeah, because people love to watch the show and have somebody to hate almost.
For sure.
You know, especially like there's another show we watch. We don't watch a lot of reality television, but we watch Survivor.
Yeah.
And like so often in Survivor, there's one guy that like goes the whole way and you're just like, why is he not voted off
Because
already?
you need an antagonist.
Yeah,
you need
exactly.
a protagonist and an antagonist. And looking back now, like, through all the challenges that we went through and all the challenges that came after me, I was like, I was never going to make it to top 2. I just, you know, and it's a weird thought. It's like I'm just part of the ensemble, you know what I mean? Like I'm good as one of 22, but I was never going to be top 2 or 3.
Yeah. And in all reality, man, it seems like you've done pretty good for yourself, you know, whether you got eliminated or not.
Yeah, you know, the thought I had, once I got to the show and I became friends with a lot of the people, and I still keep up with a lot of them, but what I realized was some of them were here for the same reasons as me, to try to get some exposure and take that next leap, and we were serious about food.
Right.
Others just wanted their 15 minutes of fame. They went right back to their old lives as soon as the show was over.
Yeah.
They got a little notoriety, they got some Twitter followers, and that was good enough for them. So for me, when I got home, I realized, like, okay, now the work begins.
Yeah.
Like, I got home, I think, in late February, early March, and then the show was going to air end of May. So I had a couple of months where I couldn't tell anybody anything. It was kind
Tough,
of
a
crazy,
little
and
bit.
people were bugging me all the time, like, oh, how'd you do? You know?
Yeah.
And then once the show started, I was like, okay, here we go. Like, the train's rolling, and I have to drive this thing. I have to figure out how to parlay this thing into something real.
Right.
And it's that foot in the door. Once you get your foot in the door, you still have to push on that door. Like, you know, that crack is not enough. You have to bust it open and say, here I am. And that's when I started getting private chef gigs and doing some small catering and doing some part-time work here and there. You know, you still have to prove yourself, right?
Yeah, for sure.
You can get in on your notoriety, but if your food's no good, it's still no good.
Right. So I've got to ask you. You said if your food's still no good, it's no good. How many times did you make red velvet cake after that?
0.
You haven't made it one time.
No.
Yeah,
No.
I can understand that fully.
I talked about it with a couple of chef and cook friends about doing maybe just something fun where we would make a red velvet cake, and then we would put in the mixed sterno into the icing, and then we would put some, like, I don't know, small explosives in it,
Right.
and blow one up sometime. We talked about that as a karmic revenge against the cake. But
So now that we know what you don't like to cook, what is your favorite thing to cook personally?
oh man, you know, it's hard for me to do favorite movies, favorite music, and favorite foods because I like so much.
Yeah.
My favorite thing is variety. I would say my single favorite ingredient is probably shrimp.
Okay.
Shrimp is delicious and versatile, and if I have some at home, my simplest thing is I'll toss them in a little bit of flour and cornstarch and salt, and I have a little fry daddy at home.
Yeah.
Fry them up, make up a quick little sriracha mayonnaise, and that's it.
Okay.
Easy stuff.
Definitely. Okay, so before we get into Atomic Ramen, because I definitely want to talk about, the restaurant you got coming. Is there another restaurant that you find yourself at in Lexington, like quite often, somewhere that you just can't get enough of their food, or?
Yeah, I have a good number of places that I love in this town. Nat's downtown is excellent. It's kind of a well-kept secret, honestly, because he's just a hole in the wall. He's so tiny. He's the size of a food truck, basically, in the McCarthy's building across from our giant center pit. But he does just fantastically flavorful Thai food, very assertive flavors, very spicy. He won't turn it down for you.
Yeah.
If you ask him to make it mild,
You're getting it.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's just one of those things. But it's fantastic. If I work downtown, I would probably eat there like 3 times a week at least.
Yeah.
He's fantastic. Buddha Lounge downtown is also really great. They've
Definitely.
got a great lunch bento box. County Club is
Okay.
great. Great variety, really good salads. We miss Sugano for
Yeah.
sushi. I don't know.
Yeah,
what-
we were talking with Marcus about it a little bit.
I don't know what we're gonna do now. It's like the way I look at Nat and all other Thai places in town. There's a big gap between them.
Yeah.
And the same with Sugano and all the other sushi places. We have a lot of decent sushi places.
Right.
But nothing close to that.
Impeccable.
Yeah.
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 Okay, so let's hop into Atomic Ramen, man. Tell us about it. Where did the idea come from?
So, what's interesting is sometimes through lines or themes come through in your life and you don't realize it till later. I did ramen as my signature dish that got me my apron on MasterChef.
Yeah.
Now, this is an hour-long challenge, so I obviously could not do a 12-hour-long stock.
Right.
So, for this one, I had gotten some smoked chicken wings and some pork bones and then just some chicken stock. Kind of started it that way, had some noodles, and did this ramen dish as my signature dish. Didn't think that much more about it after the show had ended, and then I did 2 years of basically private chef work where I would do all kinds of different foods depending on what people wanted, whether it was Southern or French, continental, Asian. Sometimes it was cocktail and hors d'oeuvre style, sometimes it was sit down buffet, and it was really fun kind of playing with different forms all the time. But I found myself when I started doing pop-ups like Night Market or Warehouse Block Party, started having to focus in, okay, you can only do 2 or 3 little dishes here. And I started honing in on ramen and on Asian street food, kind of somewhat to my roots. And I never really honestly thought about a restaurant. Everybody, after I got off of MasterChef, everybody's first question was, when are you going to open your restaurant?
Yeah, I'm sure.
And my answer was never. I was like, why would I do that? That's the dumbest thing anybody can do.
I think we had that conversation. Like, we went to, I think you had a setup at the break room there at West 6th. And they were doing like an art show, and you were serving tacos, I believe, that night. And I asked you, I was like, when are you going to open a restaurant? And that was your exact answer.
Yeah.
Like, it's not happening.
I was like, yeah, I'm not a masochist. The failure rate is so high. It's so much risk. There's so much competition.
Yeah.
It's a tough road to hoe. And I think like any small businesses, a lot of people, when they're good at something, everybody's like, oh, you should do that for a living.
Right.
And they don't realize what that gap is between, you may bake really good cookies for your office, or you may, drop some dope rhymes on a mixtape that your
Right.
friends like. But to take it to a professional level,
Execute it.
it's not just about the actual product or the artistry at all. You could literally be the best rapper in town or the best chef in town.
Yeah.
If you don't understand business, staffing, insurance, equipment, liability, service, food costs,
Right.
all that stuff, if you don't understand that, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
Period. It doesn't matter what the thing is that you do that's really great. So for me, it was very daunting, and I never thought about it. In the past 1.5, 2 years, though, I started, just when I see a for rent sign on a business building, I would take a peek in and be like, huh, that'd be interesting. I started thinking about it, but nothing really grabbed me. And then I got approached by this development company named Bear, who came to me and they said, hey, we're developing this huge shopping center at Manowar Nicholasville Road, and we're going to do a food hall in there, and we want all local restaurants in there. And we want to fill certain categories in there, and one of the categories we want is Asian/noodles. And there was nobody that fit the bill, and you came recommended to us by Weta Michael and Tal from Crank and Boom.
Awesome.
And I was like, whoa, okay.
Yeah.
I was like, and already I had that sense of like, well, I don't want to let these friends down now,
Right.
who have this kind of faith in me. And my first thought going into that meeting was like, why do I want to be in a food court in the suburbs? Like, that doesn't sound like me. Because when I was looking at spaces, I was looking at like Manchester and
Yeah.
Jefferson and North Lyme and, these cool, hipper sort of areas. And then when they started talking to me, they said, well, we're talking to Marksbury Farm, we're talking to Crank and Boom, we're talking to Smithtown, we're talking to Athenian Grill. And I was like, oh,
Yeah.
Okay.
It'd be
I was
good
like,
company.
Yeah. I said, these are my friends. These are people with really great growing brands. These are people I trust. These are people who are successful. And it's one of those things, like, you go through your life and you establish a certain level of sort of trust and faith in some of your friends and colleagues. So if somebody came to me, if Tao came to me and said, hey, can you do this thing with me next Saturday? I don't need to know what the thing is. I'll go along with it because I like her and I trust her. So hearing their names in this project, I was like, well, that's the company I want to keep for sure. So we started talking, and it's and that was like almost a year and a half ago. So it's a long process.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, I started thinking about the name. I started thinking about the menu and just the concept. How many dishes am I going to do? What kind of service? And all this stuff. And it's just been coming together.
See, that thoroughly excites me, man, because I'm actually accepting a new position on Monday. I've been at the job I've been at for 3 years now, but the job I'm taking over for maintenance at the Henry, which is the apartment complex that's there. So nice. I'm definitely going to be a frequent shopper.
Yeah.
I can't wait for that.
Have you been out there yet?
Yeah, a couple times. We've had a few of the restaurants there, but I'm excited to hear kind of some of the names you were dropping possibly being out there.
Yeah.
That would be awesome.
Yeah, they were very much fixated on having all locals in the barn, so it wouldn't be like Chipotle and Chick-fil-A and things like that. And I think it's it's definitely a better sell for something like a high-end shopping center.
Yeah.
And I'll say this, I'm thoroughly an urbanite of Lexington. I love all of our downtown small businesses. I love all the little districts that we have. I don't go outside the circle very often.
Right.
And a lot of my friends say that. They're like, oh man, I don't want to go out there, but I'll go out there for you.
Yeah.
And I've been out there a bunch of times to look at my building and do other stuff, and I've kind of grudgingly love it.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really cool vibe.
It's definitely cool how the architecture even there.
Yeah.
Like the way that they built everything and the placement and whatnot. It's definitely cool.
It's almost like the opposite of Hamburg, where you basically park your car and then you can walk around the whole time, and people hang out there. You know what I mean? People hang out. There's some, cornhole thing set up and a bunch of chairs.
Yeah.
And you can really walk around and wander. It just has a great vibe.
It was definitely a totally different vibe than what I was expecting.
Yeah.
Like, we went to the burger place that's there.
Yeah, Shake Shack.
Shake Shack, yeah. And just kind of waiting out there. We were in by that little patio area that is the grassy part that you're talking about. And it's just pretty out there.
Yeah.
I mean, which is not a word that normally comes to mind when you're talking about an urban development.
Yeah.
So that was definitely cool. And I think it'll be a great place for you guys. I mean, it's popular, so that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, man. Bryce is one of my friends. You said that he had kind of drawn some characters for Atomic Ramen.
Yes.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I started. So going back a little bit, I had to come up with a name for this place. I knew I wanted to do a ramen place.
Right.
And I started researching. I literally looked up, top 10, top 50 lists of ramen places in America. And flipping through the names, 80-90% of those ramen places had a Japanese word in the name, whether it was a location or a particular kind of dish or cuisine. And I thought to myself, like, A, I'm going into kind of a suburban area, a suburban shopping center. B, I wanted to create a brand that could be scalable, that could have some growth potential. And I thought about barriers to entry, right? When you have, there's a new Cajun place off of Leestown Road called Chupatulas.
Connie just ate there.
Yeah, I can't spell it.
I can't say it.
I don't know how to. I wouldn't know how to begin to Google it.
Right.
It's this Cajun word, right? And I've heard it before, and it's authentic.
Yeah.
Naming it something like that, but not practical.
Yes.
Right. So, I thought about different names. So I knew I didn't want to do a Japanese name. I knew I didn't want to put my name on it. And then I started thinking about, like, what are things that I think about when I think about, like, Japanese food or pop culture. And I started thinking about Godzilla and monsters and comic books and stuff and Atomic. And then after I started saying Atomic Ramen, it just had a great pop little ring to it. I got my friend Graham Allen, who does really great murals all over town and other design and logo work. He designed the logo for me, and then he turned me on to his friend Bryce Okoye, to do characters, because I wanted to develop 3 comic book characters, like a superhero team that represented Atomic Ramen. I wasn't even sure what exactly I wanted them to do, except just to have these characters, because it's one of those things, like, when you're creating something from scratch, you can do whatever the hell you want.
Right.
And I'm like, well, why not? Let's do some characters. I think that'd be fun. So we worked together. and develop this team. We don't have a team name yet. We're still working on it.
Okay.
But these 3 characters, and I'm a comic book fan. I'm a pop culture geek. I love TV and movies, and I think a lot about representation too. So I thought, if we're going to create a team from scratch, let's really do something original. So it's a 3-person team. It's led by an Afro-Latinx woman, because you don't see black women, Latin women that much in comic books. The second character is a young Asian dude who's not a martial artist, not a mystic,
So awesome.
not that crazy stuff. And then the third one is a giant robot, because who doesn't love robots?
Yeah.
So Bryce and I have all kinds of different ideas of what we want to do. One of the cool things I would love to do is next year at Lexington's Comic-Con, I want to be the first restaurant to have a table at Comic-Con.
That would be great, man. That would be really great.
Because it'd just be fun.
Yeah. I mean, Bryce is an awesome guy, man. We've hung out several times. We have a similar group of friends in Circle. And, man, just listening to him talk about some of the storylines that he develops and stuff, it's a whole nother world in his head.
Sure,
man.
yeah.
So he's definitely the perfect guy if you're trying to come up with some characters to approach about it. You said you're into comics, man. Are you a DC or a Marvel guy?
I grew up on Marvel,
Okay.
and honestly, it's one of those things that, like, something random happens in your childhood, and then you're on that path. I first picked up an issue of the X-Men in probably the mid 80s, mid to late 80s, at a summer camp in their little bookstore, store where they had it on a little rotating rack, and I picked up and it was probably around the Mutant Massacre era, the Uncanny X-Men, and I was hooked from there.
Yeah.
And I was Marvel guy.
Comic books as a kid, there's not much that can compete. I mean, just the art, the colors that pop off the, off the pages. And then the storylines, as you grow older, you realize, like, that, they reflect reality in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they may be these far out characters, but they deal with very human ordeals. I'm a huge comic book fan. Definitely a Marvel guy too. It's crazy now when you talk to people, if it's Marvel or DC, the first thing that their head goes to is the movies. And it's just, I've never thought about it in that way, but we're at a point now where this new generation, much more, they've seen the movies than they have seen or read any of the comic books.
Honestly, though, back in those days when we were reading comics, I think it was simpler just in the fact that there was one timeline, there was one canon, and then something happened in the last 10-20 years where they just kept relaunching, revamping, reinventing, like, oh no, the original X-Men's now these 6 people.
And it's kind of oversaturated a bit, man. Like, if you're trying to hop into it now, it's difficult because there is so many different
I thought about that. My daughter is 12 and she's into some comics, and I was trying to get her into, like, some of the old X-Men, but I hadn't followed it for so long. I was like, do I show her, like, mid-80s X-Men?
Right.
Or, like, where do we go from there? Like, what's a good introduction to these characters? I don't even know, because there are, like, 9 different introductions to these characters now, and all these different storylines. And then, Marvel kind of revamped their whole roster recently.
Yeah.
That was a whole different issue. Bryce and I, along with a bunch of other comic book and pop culture people, we did a panel at the Carnegie about representation and how Marvel was blaming, like, the new diversity for their
lack of sales and whatnot.
Yeah, which is a bunch of bullshit.
Yeah.
But it's kind of hard. So partly now, like, I'll just find stuff at the library and just throw them at my daughter, and she'll take to whatever she takes to. She loves Lumberjanes.
Okay.
She loves Ms. Marvel,
Awesome.
Captain Marvel. So there are a bunch more books now, especially for a young girl, to see than they were back in the day, where all the superhero females were giant, buxom, barely clad characters. You know what I mean? Like, we still have a ways to go in that, but we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, definitely. So I'd love to talk about your family, but before we hop into that, if you don't care, man, I want to ask you, are you a music venue guy? Do you like going and watching live music?
I used to a lot more. I don't get out to them as much as. I had a joke one time that I was getting so picky about venues. When I was in college, I would drive, 3 hours to see some band I've never heard of.
Right.
I went up to Bogart's all the time in Cincinnati. When the Rockledge was in Lexington, and the old Linas. Go to shows all the friggin' time. I couldn't even remember. One time I was trying to remember the bands I'd seen, and I would think of some. I was like, I saw Black 47. I was like, why? I can't even think of. But now it's just like it has to be perfect, not too far away, decent price. Somebody once said, like, well, what if Weezer came and played in your backyard,
right?
You know, on a day of your choosing, and I would say like, well, what time do they start? You know, so it's gotten kind of bad. But no, I still like to see shows. I don't see a lot of stuff locally as much.
Yeah.
But I just got tickets to see Tegan and Sarah with my daughter.
Okay, awesome.
Up in Covington. Next month.
Do you have a personal favorite right now? Maybe an up-and-coming artist or somebody that's maybe just released an album that you're really into?
Oh man, most of the stuff I listen to now is kind of like alternative pop kind of stuff. So stuff like Walk the Moon or Yesayer.
Okay.
The Decemberists are great.
Awesome. Okay, yeah, definitely. So let's hop into your family, man, if you don't care.
Sure.
Connie and I have read a little bit about the story of your mother. Would you care to share a bit about that? She's also got an awesome story about her mom, and I just love kind of that the story of an immigrant. You know, it's a good story.
Yeah. So I'll give you the long short version. I was born in China. My parents obviously were also born in China. They when they were in college and just out of college was when the Cultural Revolution was happening in China, which turned the whole country upside down economically, politically. And they were both sent, due to their family histories, they were both sent to Inner Mongolia, which is the Siberia of China, to work in a starch factory. And that's where they met. They were there for about 10 years. They had me in the interim. My dad applied for graduate school to every conceivable school in America, which is why we ended up in Fargo, North Dakota.
Right.
It was the first school that accepted him and gave him money.
Yeah.
So he ended up at North Dakota State University. And then my mom and I came on a visitor's visa about a year after that. We kept extending the visa. We started applying for naturalization, and we became citizens when I was about 15, I think. And then, like all good immigrants, my dad ditched his research job and opened a Subway sandwich shop.
Awesome.
And it's kind of amazing the whole idea of the immigrant-owned business and why you see so much of it is often in whatever countries they're coming from, you don't have those kind of opportunities.
No.
Like unless you're really connected or you're tied in with corrupt officials, all that stuff, you can't just raise some money and then open up a shop.
Right.
It's not that easy. When they come to America and they realize you can do that, they'll jump on it. They'll get loans from families. They'll save up, and they'll kind of, so that entrepreneurial spirit, I think, is just like they've been waiting for that opportunity for so long.
Yeah.
So they ran a bunch of Subway sandwich shops in town and gave me a really good sense of what to and not to do in a small business too. There were definitely things that I swore off, like, okay, I'm not going to do things this way. I'm not going to do things this way. So watching that example, I think, was really interesting. My mom, one of my favorite pictures of my mom that I've posted on Instagram is, I want to say it was maybe a college photo.
Okay.
The picture had 20 or 30 college girls in it. They all had those big, like, puffy Chinese jackets on, all in pigtails, really young, and they were all armed with rifles.
Oh, wow.
Every single one of them was posing with, a rifle, and she just looked so kind of badass. And I was
definitely.
like, I bet your mom doesn't have a picture like this.
No, highly doubtful.
But it kind of speaks to her sort of resiliency, and it's a lot to uproot yourself and go to a country where you don't know the language, you don't know the culture, you don't know how to get a job. This is America, is where you have engineers driving taxi cabs. Yeah. Because they don't have the language, or their degrees and certifications don't transfer. Yeah. You know what I mean? So, immigrants make the best of it, and immigrants, by definition, have to work twice as hard, 3 times as hard to get half as far. Right. So that's a big part of the experience. So I owe a lot of what I'm able to do now from my parents' experience, you know what I mean? To learn from them, and for them to make a better life for me. You know what I mean? I think all parents want their kids to do better.
On the shoulders of giants, man.
Absolutely. Yeah. Any young person who thinks that they invented anything, created anything from scratch, or pulled them up from their bootstraps is completely delusional. Yeah. We're all there from the support of our parents and those who came before us. Absolutely, man. So speaking about being a parent, man, you and your daughter, just seeing you guys from a distance on social media, you guys seem to have a very unique relationship.
She seems like one of the coolest little girls on the planet, man. So can you tell us a little bit about your all's relationship?
Sure. My daughter Sophia is 12, and my dad was never. He was around. This is the thing. He didn't drink. He didn't smoke. He didn't physically abuse us.
Right.
He was there. He was around. But if you asked him what grade I was in, it would take him a second. If you asked him what I was interested in, no idea.
Yeah.
One time I remember when I was being a teenager, and he walked by and he was like, "Don't do drugs." And I looked at him and I said, "You wouldn't know if I was on drugs."
Yeah.
And that was the truth. So I was basically raised by my mom, and going into parenthood myself, I knew what I didn't want to be. I didn't have necessarily a good example of a father, but I knew what I didn't want to be. I knew I wanted to be involved. And I hated hearing about friends who would say like, "Oh, my husband's babysitting the kids." It's like, that's bullshit. You don't babysit your own kids.
Yeah.
That's called parenting.
Right.
You don't hire your husband to come watch your kids like it's not his job.
Yeah.
I was like, that's not what I'm going to do. So from the minute we had Sophia, my ex-wife and I, we raised her equally. There was nothing that one of us could do that the other one couldn't do.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? We did the exact same kind of work with her. And it's been a pretty fun, amazing experience as a parent, honestly. If you ask me at any given moment, like, what's the best period of my daughter, like what's my favorite age of my daughter, it's always right now.
Yeah.
Now she's 12, so that may change when she hits 14, 15. I might say, last year was a little better.
Yeah.
You never know.
That's what Justin said. It's constantly changing.
Yeah.
They're never going to be the same person that they were a week ago even.
Yeah.
They're continually evolving.
Yeah. So sometimes I miss like phases when, she was a baby and doing funny, stupid stuff and, getting food in her, clothes, giving herself a haircut.
Yeah.
So if you guys have a girl.
We've got one on the way, 4 weeks.
Okay.
Yeah.
So be prepared. Somewhere between ages 2 and 8, they will probably cut their own hair. So it's almost nearly inevitable. I remember that morning, kids, when they get to a certain age, you have to be suspicious when it's quiet. You're like, well, what are you doing? So I got up in the morning, went down to her room, and she was sitting there on her bed looking gleeful, had this crazy severe, like, high bangs, like she was in some, like, alternative electro band. You know what I mean? Like her, just like almost to the quick of these bangs, and she had like longish bangs to her eyebrows before that, and I was like,
what happened?
I wanted to yell at her, and I also wanted to laugh.
Yeah.
She had cut off her hair and then like hid all the hair under her pillow like we wouldn't notice.
Right.
And I went and reported it to her mom. We both came down. We had to walk away for a second to laugh.
Yeah.
And then we reprimanded her. And then we had to take her to a hair salon and try to fix it a little bit.
Like a little pixie cut.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, she was, like 4.
Right.
So, they can pull off any haircut.
Totally.
As a kid.
So she seems like she's a little chef, man. Does she help you cook around the house?
She does a little bit. Yeah, she's more, when they're younger, you can definitely sort of mold them a little bit in terms of interests.
Right.
And so we did a lot of cooking when she was younger. She got into all the music that I like, and showed her Miyazaki movies and all that good stuff.
Yeah.
As she's gotten older, they start making up their own mind about stuff. Like, we can't buy her clothes anymore. You know what I mean? Like, we go. She has to shop for them. She has
at
to
12,
look at stuff, for sure.
Yeah.
And she's been honestly like dressing herself since well before that. She's a pretty opinionated, pretty sort of occasionally hard-headed kid. But now she's into drama. She's doing a lot of performances and plays.
Awesome.
She just got accepted into SCAPA for fall, which
wow.
is really exciting
Awesome.
for drama. She's in a play right now, which is what I'm taking her to right after this, at Stage Right Acting. She's in The Jungle Book, and she gets to play the snake.
Oh,
and
that's
I remember when
cool.
she got cast, and I said, you already know this, and she said, yeah, villains have the best roles. I was like, thank you.
Very true.
Exactly.
So you've talked about, kind of how she's changing. How has she changed you? How did becoming a father rock your world, man?
I'll tell you this: from the day she was born, I've been a pacifist most of my adult life.
Okay.
From the minute she was born, an asterisk appeared after the word pacifist.
Right.
It's like, I'm not going to harm or kill or, touch another individual unless you fuck with my daughter.
Right.
You're done.
Yeah.
And I think everybody feels that. And it's this kind of strange, paternalistic, instinctual kind of feeling, right, about protecting them. The thing that I have to kind of juggle is the idea of you don't want anything bad to happen to your kid. You want to protect them. But you also have to try to make them into their own person, and you can't do that by hiding them behind you. You have to let them fall and scrape their knees and make dumb mistakes and things like that. You can warn them. And at this age, too, at age 12, there's no more timeouts, there's no more punishment, there's no more taking stuff away. It's more like, okay, the thing that you did really disappointed me, and you know better than this.
Yeah.
So what I have now is guilt and conscience, and you know what I mean? Like,
yeah, definitely.
When you're 4, you're like, okay, don't do that, or I'm going to take away your toys, or don't do that, you're going to have a timeout, or you're not going to get to have dessert tonight.
And now it's psychological.
And now it truly is, and it has been for a few years. And it's, I don't treat her like an adult because she's not. I think a lot of our generation of parents fall into a trap of wanting to be friends with their kid.
Yeah.
And that when I hear people say like, "Oh, my daughter's my best friend," I was like, "Dude, you need to get some friends."
For sure.
Because she's not your equal.
No.
You're her parent first and foremost. I think you can obviously get along with them. It doesn't have to be adversarial, but at the same time, what do you do with friends? You hang out as equals, you talk as equals, they give each other advice.
Yeah.
But you don't reprimand them, you don't guide them, in that same way. So it troubles me sometimes, and I think you end up with kids who are a little bit more entitled than they should be.
Yeah, totally.
When you raise them that way, they think like, oh, okay. Like one of my biggest problems with Sophia is because she is pretty precocious. We talk about politics all the time, and I let her know why I have feelings about the Electoral College and all that great stuff in politics and religion and all that stuff. So she's gotten to the point where she thinks she can be in on every conversation. If I'm showing something on my phone to my girlfriend, she'll crane her neck over. I'd be like, dude, no. Like, if I wanted you to see it, I would show you. You're invading my privacy right now.
Right.
Or there are things that are just not appropriate for you. So, butt out of it. It's not a bad problem to have, but it's certainly like still drawing that line.
Regardless of your path, there's going to be things along those lines that are going to occur, whether it be what you're having or a totally different problem. There's definitely going to be problems that will arise. I would totally want to respect your time, man. We've got about 8 minutes left.
Sure.
So I'm going to go ahead and hop. We're still going to stick on fatherhood, but I kind of want to ask you this question. It's something that I've asked all the dads that I've had in, mainly because I'm about to be a dad.
Sure.
So what do you do on a day-to-day basis to kind of remain centered and grounded because life throws you punches? I mean, busy, staying busy and having a kid, man. What do you do to kind of remain grounded in all that?
I think, what Sophia's mom and I tried to do from day one, and this is having seen the examples of other friends who, when they become parents, suddenly they don't do anything else. They're just parents. Yeah. When the mom changes her email address to logansmommy86
right.
at gmail.com. Like, no. You know what I mean? Like, I'm never just going to be Sophia's dad.
Yeah.
Like, I'm my own person. You carve out time for yourself. You continue to do a lot of the things you do. Because if you have to ever say the sentence like, oh, I used to do this, but I don't anymore because I'm a dad.
Right.
Like, there's a balance to it. It's like if that sentence was, I used to go out and get hammered 5 nights a week, and now I don't because I'm a dad. Okay, right. that's fine. But it's like, yeah, I used to DJ a little bit, but now I don't because I'm a dad. Yeah. Or I used to work on this stuff, or we used to go out to movies, and I haven't seen a movie in 6 years.
Yeah.
Like, right? And then your kid becomes like an obstacle or a drag on you, and you don't want to ever feel that way.
Ever.
So there are a lot of things, like a lot of people say like, oh, I have a young kid, so we haven't been out to dinner in a long time. It's like, well, how's your kid going to know how to behave at a restaurant
if you don't
go out to restaurants?
Agreed.
You go to an appropriate place. You don't go to a white tablecloth 4-star restaurant with a toddler necessarily.
Right.
But
that's what Connie and I have always discussed, because everyone's like, get all your traveling out of the way now, because you're not going anywhere. And I'm like, get out of here. And like, that's why I started this podcast. I wanted to bring people on that were doing something with their lives while simultaneously being a father, because I don't think your life is over. I think it's actually
it certainly shifts. It definitely shifts. It's not the same, but it also doesn't have to be 180 different.
Right.
It doesn't have to be this other thing. You have to certainly balance it. You can't go out, before we had a kid, my ex and I, we'd go out anytime we want. We could be a little more spontaneous and say like, I don't feel like cooking tonight, let's go out to eat. Fine.
Right.
This just takes a little bit of planning. It's like, oh, she didn't nap today very well, so she's going to be kind of cranky in about 2 hours. So do we want to go out? Okay, let's get takeout instead. You know what I mean? Like, you balance those things. So we had Sophia at home, home birth with a midwife and a doula in Brooklyn, New York. And I remember the second day I was already stir crazy. I was like, we'll have to like just stay home for a week, right?
Right.
So I put her in a sling and I just went and took a walk with her, went and got an ice cream cone.
Yeah.
And we had her first babysitter, I think 2 weeks in. And it was just a friend, and we literally, we were going to go down 3 blocks, go out to dinner, and come back. So it was like 2 hours. And it was with a trusted friend, and we gave her, a bottle, and it was fine.
Yeah.
But it's one of those things that if you say, like, oh, I can't let my baby out of my sight, then it's like, okay, well, that's your choice, but it's a trade-off then, right?
And know that there's going to be a consequence for every action,
Yeah.
And I mean, that's been a big thing for me. As I told Connie, we're not going to do it how the world perceives it has to be done.
Yep.
And that's really the main reason that I started Dad is Dope, is just having people in here, because I have dreams. We have aspirations.
Oh, you just did this for free advice.
Right. Pretty much.
Very nice.
Yeah.
Well
and it's a very unique way to do it.
Yeah.
So,
and the other thing too is you have to realize as a consumer, there's an entire industry created based on a parent's insecurity, especially first-time parents. Like, of course you don't know what you're doing. You've never done this before. But it doesn't mean you have to get $10,000 worth of child safety locks, in your house for every little thing.
And everything that has baby in the name is like $20 more expensive than
it really
the
is.
Exact same
It really
product.
is. There are certain things that obviously you will want. Once that kid starts crawling, you'll put a gate at the top of your stairs. Things like that are realistic. But like, do you have to put little clips, on every cabinet thing? At some point, they're going to run into a wall and hit their head. What are you going to do? Pad all the walls?
Right.
You can't do it. Do you have to put soft corners on all your coffee tables? Not necessarily. Just keep an eye on them. If they fall down, you know what I mean? Like, there's a certain amount of sort of that trial and error that you'll figure it out. I mean, I discovered Sophia could roll over one day because I put her on the couch and walked away for a minute, and then I heard a thump, and she had rolled off the couch. And I was like, well, okay, she can roll. I'm not going to put her like this on the couch by herself anymore.
Right.
You know what I mean? But it's like...
Great advice, Dan. That's how I feel, man. It's just kind of affirming some of the things that we've already talked about.
Good.
With that being said, man, I want to go ahead and end it out. We end every episode with like kind of a rapid fire round.
Yes.
So I'm going to hit you with like either ors real quick.
Okay.
And I did 80s for Justin, so I'm going to do food for you.
Perfect.
Okay. So let's go ahead and start it out. Chocolate or vanilla?
Vanilla.
Okay. Cake or pie?
Pie.
Ice cream or yogurt?
Ice cream.
Crushed or cubed ice?
Crushed.
Fruit or vegetables?
Veggies.
Sausage or bacon?
Sausage.
Pancakes or waffles?
Waffles.
Orange or apple juice?
Neither.
Neither. Okay. Scrambled or fried?
Fried.
Beer or wine?
Cider.
Okay, fair. Asking questions or answering questions?
I do a lot of question answering, so I would like to ask.
I felt like that was a good one to end asking you a bunch of questions with.
Yeah.
I'm going to allow you just a few minutes, man, to kind of promote Atomic Ramen. If you want to give anybody kind of a heads up as to where they can go. And I know you have a fundraiser going on for it, correct?
Yeah. I've got a Kickstarter going. We're about a week into a 30-day Kickstarter. You can just look up Atomic Ramen on Kickstarter. There's a great fun video that we produced for it.
Okay.
It's like 90 seconds, but it features like 35 of my favorite people in Lexington, restaurateurs, other business owners, food people. It's a great example of how supportive a community we have here.
Yeah.
So I got the Kickstarter going. You can find Atomic Ramen on Facebook, on Instagram as well. And we're hoping to open Atomic Ramen out of the summit in early September, so fingers crossed.
Big things on the horizon, man.
Huge.
Again, Dan, thank you for coming through, talking fatherhood with me, man. It's been an honor to actually meet you. I can't wait to come through the restaurant, and I'm hoping to actually make that event that you're talking about. We just tried Pasta Garage for the first time. It's awesome.
Yeah, and they're actually making my noodles for the ramen shop.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So.
Well, Dan, thank you again, man. Enjoy your daughter's play or practice, whatever
no,
it is.
it's for real.
It's the full-on play.
Yep.
Awesome. Awesome. So enjoy that, man, and thanks for coming through, dude.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
look forward to talking to you again, man.
Appreciate it.
Have a good day. Peace.